Hey, how's it going? Welcome back. I'm Matt, and today we are doing some more mixing stuff. A little while back, I made a video about the Warm Audio WA73 EQ. It is modeled after the Neve 1073 preamp and equalizer. The video I made a couple months ago was about using it as an input device, using it as a microphone preamp to send signal into an audio interface, and showing you how it sounds on a couple different sources and what it's like to just go through it into the computer. Today I'm going to do something slightly different, which is show you how to use this or any other outboard gear you may have as a plugin. Use it in your mix, use the computer to send signal out of the interface, back into the interface through your outboard gear. This is not something that's specific to this piece of gear. You can use it for any other outboard gear, preamps, amps, equalizers, compressors, you name it. You can do this with it. In any creative way you can think to send audio out and back into your computer, this allows you to do it if you're using Logic Pro X. So last week I helped a friend's band record a live performance, and in doing that, I recorded both the audio and video for that. So I have the audio here. It's unmixed, it's just the raw files. I've done a little tweaks to it, but not to any of the tracks you're gonna hear today. So I have a recording of their band. So I'm gonna show you what the Warm Audio 73 EQ sounds like on some of the drum tracks, and just show you how to use it as a plugin. So here's what the full band sounds like. So that's a quick snippet. Now I'll show you what the drum tracks sound like. So that's just the unmixed drums. I know there's a lot of bleed in those microphones. It was recorded live in a small room, and for something like that, I'm not really that worried about bleed, especially for this kind of music. I want it to sound like they're all together. So I'm not really worried about that. There are times when you'd want more isolation. This wasn't one where it was that necessary. So now we're going to take the snare drum track and we're going to send it out to the Warm Audio device. Here's the snare by itself. Now I'm going to send it out to the Warm Audio device. The way you do that in Logic, you go to Add a Plugin, and down under Utility, you go to I/O and Mono. Because the preamp is a mono device, you select Mono. Now I have it set so that my output 5 on my preamp is sending out and input 3 is coming back in from the preamp. Now you hit the ping button and that just sends something to determine the latency, of that round trip for the audio to go, and it does that just so it can play it back at the correct time. So now that we have that set, we can use our EQ. So the one thing you just have to make sure with this device is to press the line button so that it knows to pull from the line signal in the back of the device. Now we'll play it through there. As you can see by the LEDs on the device, it is sending signal and coming back in. It's coming in a little hot. I'm going to pull back on the output trim just a little bit. That way we're coming back into Logic with a healthy signal that's not at risk of overloading. Now, I like to engage the tone button. It gives it a little bit more of an aggressive sound, and for the snare drum, I think that's a good idea. Now the tone button also does add some volume, so I pulled back more on the trim just to compensate for that added volume. Now I'm going to use the blue dial to see if I want to put a high pass filter on this signal. So I set the high pass filter at 80 hertz. I didn't want to go too much higher because you start to lose the body of the snare drum. Even though it stays crisp, you lose a lot of that full body of the instrument. But cutting out up to 80 gets rid of some of that extra rumbliness that could build up the more low-end information you have over all these sources, especially with the bass and the kick drum still not added in. Now I'm going to mess around with the EQ. This device has a 3-band EQ. The high and low EQs are shelves, and the mid EQ is a bell. So I use the low EQ to just pull back a little bit on the 220 hertz. Alright, so I use the mids to boost a little bit of 3200, and I use the highs to boost a little bit at 12K. So I think this just makes it a little crisper, and I just think it just makes the snare drum cut a little more. So I'm going to play it to you without the EQ, and then I will engage it, and we'll listen to it with the EQ again. Here it is without the EQ. And with the EQ. So I really like what that does. Again, it just makes it cut more, it's crisp, and it really just has that energy that I want it to have. So now I'm going to do the same thing, but we're going to put it on the overhead track. So I've done the same thing, pinged it, set it up for the same inputs and outputs, and we're good to go. I'm going to disengage the EQ that I put on the other track. So this time I pulled back on the gain a little bit to get the signal right rather than the trim. The only difference that that's going to make is that the more gain you have, the more character or maybe drive you may get out of the preamp. And with the trim pot, you're not affecting how much you're driving the preamp on the front end. So again, start with the high pass filter and go from there. So for the overheads, I use the high pass filter at 50 hertz. The reason for that is just that I want to still keep that low end roundness that the toms and the kick drum are going to have, and I just want to get rid of the rumble from the bass and the other instruments. Now we're going to kick in the EQ. So for this one, I pulled back a little bit of the 110 in the lows. I brought up a little bit of 700 in the mids just to get more attack out of all the drums, out of the snare and the toms. And then I brought up around 16K because I like the crispness, I like the high end that gets out of the cymbals. I think that gets that extra shimmery sound out of them, and they seem to have a little more sustain. I just really like what it does to the cymbals without bringing out any harshness. So here it is without the EQ. And here it is with the EQ. So obviously there's more things I do with this mix later. I just kind of wanted to show you what the warm audio sounds like on drums and on some of those signals, but also how to use your outboard gear as plugins with Logic Pro. So it's really cool, it's really convenient. It's a great feature that they have that I didn't know about until I got outboard gear, and now it makes me want to buy more, so, you know, kind of feeds my bad obsession with spending money and buying gear, but it's fun, and it sounds cool, and now it's like having another plugin, and there's something that's really satisfying about moving dials, and really just listening and moving something with your hand. There's something to that, the ability to physically touch a piece of gear, move it, have the sound change. There's something very exciting about all that, but also it sounds good. I really like this thing. It's really amazing. It's a good piece of gear for recording and mixing, which, you know, it has a lot of features. I really like how the EQ sounds. I just like it. That's the warm audio device on drums in a mix, and that's the Logic I/O plugin. If you want to hear this warm audio device on some other signals, I do have a video for that, and I will link it in the description. And if you like this video, hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, I put up stuff every Monday, so hit that subscribe button. And if you like this little snippet of this partially mixed song, it's from a band called Zorn in Philadelphia, and within the next few weeks, the video with this song will be coming out, so stay tuned for that. I will post information about that once I get it. And yeah, that's all I got for you this week, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.